So you are said to be the first senator to own Bitcoin. What attracted you to the space?
Well, I used to be Wyoming state treasurer. I invested the state's permanent funds. So in that role, I was always looking for a good store of value in addition to a good return on investment that we could use annually. I wanted a mix. And what I found after I started looking at Bitcoin specifically was that it's a very good store of value. So sort of as an experiment, I purchased some Bitcoin. As you know, when you have skin in the game, you tend to pay more attention. And I didn't have much skin in the game back in 2013. Still don't, as a matter of fact, but I paid about $1,000 for 3 Bitcoin. And now today, 3 Bitcoin are doing pretty well. So it was just a good enough taste for me to really dive in. And then it turns out that as I've learned more about it, the elements that make it a great store of value at a time when the US dollar is being printed at an unprecedented clip, thereby debasing its value. I look at Bitcoin as a very important additional store of value.
What would you say to critics that talk about the volatility of Bitcoin and it not being a store of value?
Well, if you look at the elements of gold that make it a good hard asset, it is, in my opinion, a very good store of value. And it's not correlated with other investments, also making it a helpful store of value there. And we're seeing it come into the mainstream. You're seeing people like Elon Musk make big investments in Bitcoin. You saw Coinbase just today go public and have a valuation that is just dumbfounding. And so it is going mainstream, and that's because everybody from Jamie Dimon, who used to criticize Bitcoin, is looking at making an investment in Bitcoin because I think they finally understand why it's a good, solid store of value.
It's been interesting to see, especially with Coinbase's recent trading. I haven't checked the numbers most closely, but I think it's probably within spitting distance of a Goldman Sachs in terms of market cap. So just curious, you're an early adopter of Bitcoin, but many in Congress probably do not understand the space so much. How are you using your position in the Senate Banking Committee to help educate lawmakers about the opportunities in the crypto space or why it's a viable option?
Well, Carlton, that's why I wanted on the banking committee. I come from a small population state, so I want to protect our community banks, but I also want to use it as an avenue to explore having a good but simple base of federal regulations that are quite frankly modeled after what Wyoming has already done. Wyoming has been the great innovator in the space of distributed ledger and digital assets. So I'm creating a financial innovation caucus. It's bipartisan. My co-chair is Senator Sinema from Arizona. And so the starting point is to educate people, help them understand why Bitcoin has many of the qualities of gold and why its value will transcend generations and countries. As we see China and other countries get into digital assets, what we know is that China is not going to be a place where my privacy or your privacy is going to be protected in the digital asset space. So the United States just really has to innovate in this area and participate in the digital asset space as a leader and as the world currency in order to make sure that we maintain the US dollar as the world currency and also ensure the qualities of privacy that we'll never get from China.
Yeah, and just curious, as China continues to experiment or adopt cryptocurrencies, and other countries are also farther ahead than the US, do you view that as a serious security concern for the US, as other countries may be more willing to ramp up in this space and that the US might just get left behind?
I think the United States will quickly understand the problem created by allowing China or other countries to dominate in this space. We are the world's currency. We need to stay the world's currency. And I was delighted to see that the United States has contracted with MIT to help them understand and maneuver and create a digital dollar. I think that's important, not so much because we need a digital dollar right now to transact business, but that we need a digital dollar as an alternative to the Chinese digital yuan in a way that will protect our privacy and our ability to transact in that space.
You challenge some of the perceptions that fellow lawmakers or constituents may have about cryptocurrencies. There's been a lot of headlines about, scams, use in illicit transactions, or Bitcoin and others being a bubble asset.
Well, that's why I think it's important that we have a financial innovation caucus here in the U.S. Senate, and then that we work with House members who are interested in this space as well. We need to make sure that we have a regulatory climate that will protect from illicit use of this asset class. And in fact, there are good, solid applications that allow us to mete out illicit use of the asset class. And I think that that is another thing that is rarely known. There's been a lot of progress there. Every single transaction that is made on the blockchain with regard to Bitcoin is known. It's just not known who makes them. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure as there was a transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration is that rulemaking put Bitcoin and other digital assets on the same plane as fiat currencies, in that you need to know your neighbor. That's a banking principle, but you don't need to know your neighbors or know your customer, excuse me. Know your customer, but you don't need to know your customer's customer.
Are there any other regulatory frameworks that you think would be appropriate for cryptocurrencies, or maybe the exchanges and platforms that they trade on?
Could you say that again? I missed a key word in your question.
Oh, of course. Any other regulations that you think would be important for Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and the platforms that they trade on?
We'll be looking at the Bank Secrecy Act. We want to work with the FDIC. I'm really anxious to meet with the FDIC's first chief innovation officer, a gentleman named Sultan Meji. So we're working with the SEC. We're working. Bitcoin's a commodity, and some of these assets may be bundled into securities. And as we watch the definitions and the opportunities and the platforms, as you say, for acquisition of these assets change in such a way that at sometimes they may be considered commodities, and other times they may be bundled into something that looks more like a security. We need to stay in touch with all of the federal regulatory agencies that are going to touch this space in a way that makes sure that opportunity and innovation is not only allowed, but allowed to thrive.
Do you think that Bitcoin has the ability to help serve the underbanked or the unbanked?
Absolutely. One of the great things about Bitcoin is that anyone can acquire the asset. You don't even need to have a bank account to have a Bitcoin wallet. And you can track its value every day. So in some ways, it's a great equalizer in that the guy who is working outside this building today, washing the windows, has every bit as much ability to own Bitcoin in his own wallet as Elon Musk. And so I've talked to some of the Capitol Police around here. Obviously, we're having a conversation in a Senate office building today. I can go outside and talk to the Capitol policemen that are guarding the entrance, and they own Bitcoin. And I think it's because it's one of those assets that is both friendly to millennials and is universal in its ability to own and track its value. So because of that, I think it is such a good store of value. So I would say to the guy who's outside of this building washing the windows, hang on to that Bitcoin, buy it, hold it, and when you hold it, it'll be there when you retire. Who knows how many US dollars will have been printed by the time that gentleman retires. But what we do know is that there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever created. And so you've got an automatic finite supply, and there's so many guarantees about the manner in which Bitcoin is going to be mined and rolled out and can be held, that there are assurances that these values are going to hold up, and it's going to hold up over the test of time.
We have a ton of your questions coming in, so I do want to try to get to all of them. One is from Joe, who is asking, do you expect strong bipartisan agreement on the importance of digital currencies, kind of a unification that you saw in Congress maybe over the space race a few decades ago?
Yeah, I actually do. I think that in a time when the members of Congress are deeply divided along party lines and there's a lot of acrimony, that this is going to be one of those issues that will bring people together. So that's another component about this that I'm really excited about. And I think it gives an opportunity, because it's such an innovative space, for us all to learn about it together and try to understand the potential that it holds for our economy and globally, so that we can be bipartisan participants in seeing it through.
A perfect follow-up question here from Robert, who's asking if there's enough interest in the Senate right now to pass legislation or guidance over the next 2 years, or is that going to be maybe a longer time horizon for regulations on cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think with regard to laws on cryptocurrency, I do think it's farther out. And that's because so few members of the US House and Senate really do understand Bitcoin and other digital assets. So that's part of the reason we formed this caucus, this innovation caucus. But in terms of the regulatory climate, this is happening much faster because states are innovating, like my state of Wyoming created laws that include chartering special purpose depository institutions to allow people to hold digital assets. And so those have to go through certain federal hurdles to sort of bless the guidance that the state created in that area, and hopefully to adopt Wyoming's leadership and high quality regulatory parameters and side rails. And once that happens, I think there's just going to be an explosion of opportunity in this space. So the regulators are going to have to be a little bit ahead of the U.S. Congress. But once the U.S. Congress starts to catch up, then you'll, I think, see the federal government involve itself in opportunities that the states are already innovating in.
And last question comes from a viewer who wants to remain anonymous. One of the hallmarks of Bitcoin is, even though every transaction is tracked on a ledger, there is still some measure of privacy. And the anonymous viewer is asking, why should we believe that the US will respect people's privacy in transacting in Bitcoin?
Well, because it's a non-fiat currency. Bitcoin was not created by a government. It is an algorithm that, in fact, the creator of the codes, the algorithms that make up Bitcoin's capability to operate was done completely outside of any government. And it's secure in that, in your anonymity, in that every single transaction it is visible when you see a Bitcoin sold and a Bitcoin bought, it can be seen by literally everyone. But the privacy comes in not knowing who bought it and who sold it. That's going to stay private, and that is the advantage of a non-fiat currency. Honestly, I strongly encourage people to read more about it, because you'll see how many qualities there are of Bitcoin and other digital assets that make it more like gold, make it more like what has always been throughout the history of the world, the most long-lasting investments.
And last question, since you encourage people to learn more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, where should they go?
Well, I recommend a book called The Bitcoin Standard. That's just sort of an easy Bible, if you will, on Bitcoin. That's where I would start. And there's another book called Layered Money that is brand new, that is even shorter, but is a more condensed version of a primer on Bitcoin and digital assets.